Anthem for Doomed Youth. Starter activity. Think about an anthem that might represent today's youth. This is a song, it's made into a song by Benjamin Britten actually, but it's a poem that aims to be a poem that represents the youth of the First World War, the teenagers and the young men of the First World War who died there. They're described as doomed. Look at the learning objectives. We're going to really try and learn about extended metaphors. That's extended or long comparison. This poem makes a very long comparison, which we'll see in a minute. And it's really about the horror and pity of war. This was the breakthrough poem for Wilfred Owen, and it's worth finding out a bit about his life. Not a huge amount, but basically he'd been suffering from shell shock. At the front, he saw some men die horribly and one go blind from gas. You can look at two other poems that explore that. And he was suffering from shell shock and was put in a mental hospital in Scotland, in Edinburgh, where he was actually, he really recovered. He was treated well by a psychiatrist, and he met a poet, Sassoon, who really encouraged him to write poetry, and this was one of the first poems that he wrote. This poem is full of the obsessions of Wilfred Owen. Religion, death, nature, young men, and poetry are all there, the music and texture of words. This is the mental hospital that he stayed in. Before you actually listen to my explanation of the poem, try and put the poem into the correct lines. This is a great exercise because it really gets you thinking about the rhyme scheme. This poem is very carefully structured with lots of rhymes that emphasize some of the key ideas that Owen wanted the reader to really understand. This is Owen's own platoon. Look at them, the raggedy, desperate men. This is the poem itself, Anthem for Doomed Youth, and it's worth reading again and again before you listen to what I've got to say about it. What passing bells for these who die as cattle, only the monstrous anger of the guns, only the stuttering rifles' rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries for them now, no prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. Anthem for Doomed Youth. What passing bells for those who die as cattle. He opens the poem with a question. A question that says, what bells, funeral bells, a passing bell is a bell for someone who's passed or died. Funeral bell should be rung for those who've died like cattle. In other words, for the soldiers who've been slaughtered like cows are slaughtered for meat. They're slaughtered on the battlefield, of course. And then the rest of the 8 lines of this octet, the first opening of the poem, is an answer to this question. Only the monstrous anger of the guns. So they personifies the guns as this kind of really angry, monstrous, terrifying god. Only the stuttering rifles' rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. A hasty orison is a quick prayer. An orison is a prayer, so they don't have time to pray, but it's sort of their reply with a stuttering rifle. Notice the kind of onomatopoeia there, and also the alliteration of rapid rattle, combining alliteration and onomatopoeia there, suggesting the kind of stress and fear of the battle. No mockeries for them from prayers or bells, so they're not mocked by the prayers or bells of the church. Owen had been religious, but then decided that it was wrong. And now he talks about the prayers and bells of the church being a kind of mockery. Nor any voice of mourning save the choirs. So there will be no one to say how terrible it is that they've died, or mourning, save except for the choirs. Now look at what the choirs are. Are they the choirs of the church? No. They're the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells. In other words, the high-pitched, shrill, demented, mad choirs of the bombs, of the screaming bombs, the wailing bombs, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. And he ends this section with saying that the bugles will be calling for them. And bugles are played when someone's died from the shires or country districts. So there'll just be a trumpet blown, essentially, for when they've died, and they won't have any sort of proper ceremony. That's a diagram of a shell, well worth looking at, to see how horrifying they really were. Deadly weapons. The last 6 lines of the poem, or the sestet, open with a question: what candles may be held to speed them all? What candles may be held by the boys and people in a church to speed them up to heaven? And that's the picture there, to suggest them, or help them go quickly to heaven. The answer is: not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. So there won't be time or the situation for boys to have a proper ceremony of death, of proper funeral, but the boys will just be looking sadly. Brows shall be their pool, their flowers, the tenderness of silent minds. So we have, towards the end of this poem, not a lot of noise, but silence, a sense of the silent minds. The tenderness of silent minds will be the way in which these soldiers are commemorated. They won't have flowers that will commemorate their death. There won't be time for that sort of funeral. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pool. The pallor, the whiteness of the girls' brows, their foreheads, their faces, essentially, will be the pool. A pool is a cloth that you put over a coffin or a tomb to commemorate someone who's died. And so what we have is this kind of image of the fact that an image where only the whiteness of a girl's face, learning that her boyfriend, her brother, her husband has died, will be the pool. They won't have a proper ceremony. That's the whole point of this poem here. There will be no proper ceremony. There will only be what people are thinking, their tenderness of silent minds, and the girls' paleness, the pallor of their faces to commemorate them. No proper drawing down of blinds. Is when people there'll be a death in the family and they draw down the blinds or draw down the curtains, and to commemorate the fact that these people had died. But that's not going to happen. The slow dusk is going to be the commemoration of the dead soldiers. And this picture here gives us a deep sense of that. You can sense the dusk, the closing down of the battle at the end of the day, of the twilight, and that is the commemoration of these soldiers' death. This is the first draft of the poem. Notice some really interesting changes that Owen made. He first of all called them sad youth, but then changed it to doomed, a much more powerful word. Absolutely no chance they're going to survive. Of course, Owen died himself. And then, things like he initially being a bit more positive about religion. He said no music for all of them, and he changes that to no mockeries for them. So, and there's some different other changes as well, well worth looking at that, and that's the second draft of the poem. Again, stop and have a look at his changes, for calling them lost souls. That again was changed. This is the poem in its entirety, and it's worth looking at overall. It is a difficult poem. The key thing to remember is it's structured around two questions. What passing bells or what funeral bells will be rung out for these people, these soldiers who die like cattle? And really then there's an extended comparison talking about how it's really just the noises of battle that will be the song that commemorates the death of these people. And then the sestet, what candles may be held to speed them all. That again, there's going to be no proper church funeral for them, only the looks of boys and the paleness of girls and the tender memories of these girls, of the boyfriends and husbands that have gone. We've got all the difficult vocabularies explained here. You must look over it and annotate your book and work out exactly what the difficult words mean. It's well worth looking at some words. For example, pall, a cloth spread over a coffin or hearse or tomb. And that is going to be the sort of commemoration of a dead person in most funerals. But of course, the pall, it doesn't exist with these young men, often just lost in the midst of battle. All that will be found for them is the pallor of young girls, the paleness of young girls. The sounds. This poem, the first 8 lines, full of the kind of sounds of battle, using onomatopoeia, alliteration to create a kind of sense of the horror of war. Look carefully at those. You need to appreciate the techniques that Owen uses here, and you need to think about the meaning of the poem as well. So look through these questions and see if you can answer them. Then look back about and try and review it and think about Owen's great theme, the pity of war. Why does this poem kind of create a sense of pity for the young men? It's a lament, a sad song for the dead. It takes the structures as a sonnet, and sonnets crucially used to be love poems, often religious as well. This poem is a bit different. It has religious elements in it, it has elements of love in it, but it's something entirely different as well. So think about the context again, something I've already discussed with you. Is it patriotic, this poem? Is it actually saying it's a great and good thing to die for one's country? I'm not so sure. Where do the sympathies of the poet lie? And annotate the poem.